Welcome everyone. Today we're walking through the new features and improvements in firmware 5.1.1.0.66300 for the PTZ model Z3-4ADSN-4. Let's get started. Before we get into the features, there's one important step to cover first. This firmware release includes a factory tool update. To take full advantage of all the improvements in this release, you need to run the factory tool in addition to the standard firmware upgrade. The good news is, you don't need to go looking for it. The factory tool and the full instructions are included inside the firmware download folder. There is one critical thing to be aware of. Running the factory tool performs a full factory reset on the camera. That means all your settings will be wiped. So before you do anything else, export a backup of your camera configuration. It takes 30 seconds and saves you a lot of time. The order is simple: backup first, firmware upgrade second, factory tool third, import backup fourth. This next feature gives you a new level of control over how the camera decides when to switch between day and night mode. It's called light measurement mode, and it does exactly what the name says. It lets you choose which source the camera uses to measure light when making that day-night decision. There are two options. The first is image sensor. The camera reads the light level directly from its own image. What the lens sees is what drives the switch. If the scene looks bright, the camera stays in day mode. If the image gets dark, it switches to night. The second is hardware sensor. This uses a dedicated physical light chip on the face of the camera. It measures the ambient light in the environment around the camera, not what the camera is looking at. Why does this matter? Here's a real example. A camera mounted on the ceiling of an underground car park, physically sitting in darkness. The lens is zoomed in toward the entrance, so the entire image the camera captures is the bright street outside. Nothing dark is in the frame at all. With the hardware sensor method, the camera reads the dark ambient light around its own body and switches to night mode, even though every pixel it's recording is a bright daylight scene. With the image sensor method, the camera looks at its own image, sees brightness, and correctly stays in day mode. That's the difference. Same camera, same installation, completely different result depending on which method you choose. Before we continue, I want to shift focus for a moment. The next few slides are dedicated to PTZ home positions. Now, the Z3 has two completely separate home position systems. And the reason I want to cover both briefly is simply to make a clear distinction between them, because the improvements in this firmware relate specifically to one of them, the auto-tracking home position. So before we get to those improvements, I want to make sure we're all on the same page about what each system is and how they differ. Let's start with the general home position. The general home position is the simpler of the two systems. It is a saved camera position that the camera returns to automatically after an operator finishes moving it manually, whether that's via joystick, the web interface, or any PTZ control. The home position is simply saved as a preset on the camera and is configured within the PTZ function settings. Once the operator stops moving the camera, a countdown begins. After the configured idle time runs out, the camera quietly returns to its home position on its own. The auto-tracking home position works differently, and this is where the distinction from the general home position becomes important. This home position is only applicable when the auto-tracking function is running. It has no effect when the camera is being used manually without tracking. Auto-tracking is enabled directly within the analytic role, either sterile area or line crossing. And the auto-tracking home position is configured in the same place. When auto-tracking is active, this home position takes over, and it will override the general home position. Two conditions will trigger a return to home. The first, the camera loses its target, and it disappears from the scene. The second, the tracked target stops moving and remains stationary beyond the configured still time. In both cases, the camera returns to its defined auto-tracking home position automatically. Now that we understand the two different types of home positions, let's focus on the auto-tracking home position, because we have some improvements. Preset Override is a new capability for the Z3's auto tracking system. Previously, when the camera was actively tracking an object, calling a preset was not possible. Manual camera movement was always available, but presets were blocked. With this firmware, that changes. Calling a saved preset is now treated as a manual input, meaning you can call any preset at any time, even while the camera is mid-track. And here's the important part. Once you finish a manual input or preset call, the camera automatically returns to its auto-tracking home position. It goes back to its defined starting point, ready to begin tracking again from there. Because of the new preset override capability, the Smart Tracking configuration screen has been updated to reflect this. Set the control priority to manual control to give the operator full flexibility, allowing them to call presets or move the camera manually while auto-tracking is running. When in manual control, there are 3 timer scenarios to be aware of. Auto home triggers when the target disappears from the scene for the set time. Still time triggers when the tracked target stops moving for the set time. Auto home and still time are only applicable once auto tracking has begun and there is no manual intervention. In both cases, the camera returns to its auto-tracking home position. Manual control takes over when the operator intervenes. Once the operator finishes their input or preset call and the camera is idle for the set time, it automatically returns to its auto-tracking home position, ready to track again. All 3 timers are adjustable between 5 and 100 seconds. Auto-tracking priority is the alternative mode in the control priority dropdown. In this mode, auto-tracking has complete priority. The operator cannot call presets or move the camera manually while tracking is active. The manual control timer is not available here. This mode is not new, but it has been improved. Previously, a single timer handled both the disappearing target and the stationary target scenarios. Now they are separated. Auto home and still time each have their own independent timer, giving you precise control over how the camera responds to each situation. This mode is best suited for installations where uninterrupted tracking is critical and no operator intervention is needed. Before we wrap up, a few additional fixes and improvements worth noting. The first is a false alarm fix. When the PTZ was moving between presets, during a tour for example, the camera's own physical movement could cause stationary objects to be detected as moving targets. That was triggering false AI alerts. That issue is now resolved. The second is an improvement to the DDA algorithm. Object detection accuracy and classification performance has been enhanced across all analytic rules. And finally, general bug fixes and stability improvements throughout the firmware. That covers everything in firmware 5.1.1.0.66300 for the Z3-4ADSN-4. Thank you for joining. If you have any questions, we're happy to help.